Have you ever imagined what would happen if your creation spiraled out of control and began to shape your reality? In this fascinating and terrifying story, we follow Alex, an artist on the brink of chaos, as his fictional character, Kronos, transcends the pages and becomes a cultural and dangerous phenomenon. In this video, we dive into Alex's mind, a creator who, upon seeing his work take on a life of its own, must face the consequences of his creation. Amid protests, rebellions, and the collapse of his own identity, he asks himself, how can you control something that has already taken over the world? Get ready for an intense story about the transformative power of art and what happens when the creator and their creation become one. Let's see how far this epiphany can take us. Alex squinted as he watched the live video on his phone. Masked youths holding spray cans covered the walls of a subway station with black paint and phrases he had written himself. "Destroy what destroys you," they chanted in unison, like a mantra of revolt. To the bewildered crowd around them, it was vandalism. But to Alex, it was much more. It was the moment Kronos, his character, escaped from the pages into reality, and he had no idea how to control it. A dark fear pierced Alex's chest. For a long time, he had wished to be more like Kronos, his comic book anti-hero. While Alex struggled to survive life's failures, Kronos was the opposite, anarchic, charismatic, and fearless. He always had a sharp comeback, a rebellious attitude, turning chaos into art. Everything Alex couldn't be. And maybe that was why Kronos had become more than just a character. He was the voice of a generation lost between silent revolts and the relentless pressure of social media. Kronos was a success, but not just as a comic. He had become a cultural phenomenon. His sharp, nihilistic phrases, his rebellious gestures, his bold actions, everything was spilling out from the pages into the real world. T-shirts printed with his face, tattoos of his words, cosplayers bringing the character to life at events around the world, a legion of devoted followers. Alex, on the other hand, watched from a distance. He should have felt on top of the world after all. This was every author's dream. But to him, every cry of Kronos sounded like bitter irony. One thought tormented him constantly. They don't understand. They never understood, because deep down, Kronos was never truly a hero. He was a personification of Alex's frustrations, a mask to hide his own search for meaning. And now, watching his character become a kind of prophet of chaos, Alex felt the weight of doubt. Had he created a monster? Or worse, had he become one? Before we dive into this intense journey full of lessons, don't forget to leave your like and subscribe to the channel. It helps spread this message to even more people. And if you know someone who needs to reflect on how stories can impact our lives, share this video. Let's inspire more people together. It was a rainy Tuesday, one of those that seemed to drag the weight of the world with it. Alex was in his studio, scribbling ideas for the next edition of Kronos, when a notification appeared on his phone screen. He didn't know that message would change his life forever. The alert was clear, direct, and disturbing. The headlines were everywhere. Kronos rebels vandalize subway station. Photos showed a group of masked youths armed with spray cans, turning the subway walls into a visual manifesto. Phrases like "destroy what destroys you" and "be the storm they don't expect" were scrawled all over, like a kind of anarchic gospel. Alex immediately recognized those words. They were his. And now they were alive, echoing through the city like a call to rebellion. The initial shock soon gave way to an even deeper sense of unease. When he thought the act of vandalism was an isolated case, he realized he was just beginning to understand the scope of the problem. Within days, Alex discovered similar incidents were popping up everywhere: graffiti on public buildings, store invasions, even direct confrontations with the police. Young people who called themselves the followers of Kronos were taking to the streets, growing bolder, filming their actions and sharing them on social media. An Instagram account with the name The Followers of Kronos was going viral with each new post, the rebel actions always ending with the hashtag #BeKronos. The tension grew like a wave about to break. Alex felt the world closing in around him, a mix of pride and horror consuming his thoughts. It was impossible not to feel fascinated by the power of influence his creation had achieved, but the weight of responsibility pressed down on him. Had he crossed a dangerous line? Deep down, one question echoed, hammering incessantly in his mind. Was Kronos a puppet in the hands of his followers, or was he himself the master of a directionless generation? One thing was clear: the chaos he had created for entertainment was now now spilling into the real world like a fire he could no longer extinguish. And the world was watching. The days that followed the subway incident felt like a long nightmare from which Alex couldn't wake up. He isolated himself in the studio, curtains drawn, as if the outside world was a distorted reflection of his own mind. With every new headline, with every venomous comment passed on by friends or colleagues, a new weight settled on his shoulders. You're not responsible for what people do with your art, some said, trying to ease his burden of guilt. But those words didn't bring him peace, because he knew his creation wasn't just an innocent story. It carried the voice of his frustrations, his cynicism, his own search for something he could barely define. Others were more critical, accusing him of fueling chaos, of being the architect of senseless rebellion. You brought a dangerous character to life, they said, and now the monster is out of the cage. Alex wanted to scream that they didn't understand, that Kronos was never meant to be taken seriously. But did he even understand himself? Alex's internal conflict deepened with each passing day. In sleepless nights, he revisited the first editions of Kronos, as if trying to solve a puzzle from the past. There, on the pages yellowed by time, he saw a journey that was not just of the character, but of himself as well. Kronos, originally, had been a response to Alex's anger against the world, a way to translate his sense of powerlessness into action. But over the years, something had changed. Kronos had stopped being just a personal escape and had become something larger, a messiah of chaos, a guide for rebellion, an anarchic explosion with no clear cause. And the more Alex reviewed his work, the more he asked himself, did I hide behind Kronos' nihilism to avoid facing my own truth? Or had I, unconsciously, always wanted him to be exactly that, a prophet of destruction? The questions seemed to multiply, and the answers slipped away like smoke. One of those nights, when guilt seemed to reach its peak, Alex found himself staring at his email inbox aimlessly. That's when he noticed a message he wasn't expecting. The sender was a stranger, Jin, and yet the words felt familiar, as if they echoed a call he didn't know he had been waiting for. I am an admirer of the complexity of Kronos, the message read with an unexpected calmness. Your story goes deeper than just chaos. And perhaps you do too. I'd like to meet with you to talk about art and responsibility. Maybe we can discover something together. Alex hesitated. Jin claimed to be a Buddhist monk, something that sounded odd for an author who had never seen himself as anything more than a cynical observer of the world. Yet there was something in those words, a simplicity that pulled him like a gentle but irresistible current. And amidst the chaos of his mind, Alex made a decision that could change everything. He replied to the email. Alex didn't know exactly what he expected to find when he entered the small cafe hidden in the heart of the Asian Quarter. The aroma of incense and green tea mixed with the soft murmur of voices around him. And there he was, Jin, the Buddhist monk, sitting at a table in the corner, like a figure out of place, and at the same time perfectly at peace with the chaos surrounding him. Jin was a middle-aged man with a serene but intense gaze, as if he could see straight into the essence of whoever looked at him. His traditional robe made him stand out, an almost supernatural presence amidst the modern bustle. Alex hesitated before sitting down, trying to understand what a monk could see in Kronos, or why he had taken an interest in his work. Thank you for coming, Jin said, his voice as soft as the motion of his hands as he poured tea. There was no judgment in his tone, only a tranquility that seemed unsettling to Alex. For a moment, Alex felt exposed, as if he were about to reveal something about himself that even he didn't understand. The first words were exchanged cautiously, like two strangers testing the waters. Jin spoke of Kronos with admiration, but it wasn't ordinary admiration. He saw layers that few others did. Your character is more than just an anti-hero, Jin commented. Kronos represents the internal conflict of human existence, the search for meaning, the fight against imposed order, the resistance to norms. But every blade has two edges. Jin paused, taking a sip of tea. Alex, without realizing it, held his breath, as if each word was a piece of a puzzle he needed to solve. The same blade that cuts bread can cut flesh, Jin said calmly, setting his cup on the table. What is the purpose of your blade, Alex? Was a simple question, but its impact was like a stone dropped in a calm lake, sending ripples of doubt through Alex's heart. The blade was his art, his words, Kronos' story. And in that moment, he found himself unable to answer. Because for the first time, someone had looked beyond the surface of the story and asked about his true intent. The monk wasn't there to accuse him, and that was what unsettled Alex the most. Jin didn't seem interested in pointing fingers or condemning the actions inspired by Kronos. He wanted dialogue. He wanted to understand. And it made Alex ask himself something he had never considered. Did he even understand the purpose of his own creation? Jin continued, "Art is like the wind. It can be a breeze that refreshes or a storm that destroys. The creator, consciously or not, always directs the flow of the wind. But have you ever asked yourself which direction you want to go?" As Jin spoke, Alex felt the monk's words echo in his mind, stirring more questions than answers. For the first time, he stood before someone who saw beyond the rebellion, the nihilism, and the chaos of Kronos, and glimpsed the possibility of something more, a hidden responsibility, a message still undiscovered, waiting to be found. The meeting didn't bring immediate answers, but it opened a new loop, a fresh search for purpose, for the intention that Alex might have been trying to ignore. He left that cafe unsure of where it would all lead, but with one clear thought: he needed to figure out what the true purpose of the blade he had created was. And maybe Jin could guide him on that journey. The meetings with Jin brought Alex something he hadn't expected: the discomfort of clarity. At first, their conversations were intense, destabilizing, each reflection a small crack in his understanding of the world and his own art. But it was in the silence of solitary days, away from Jin's probing gaze, that Alex felt the weight of his past choices. He realized there was an enormous difference between creating a character that challenges the world and one that destroys for the sake of destruction. And for the first time, he understood that Kronos needed to change, and so did he. But change wasn't easy. Alex spent sleepless nights, wrestling with himself, reviewing every edition, every corrosive line Kronos ever said, trying to find a new voice for the character. A voice that wasn't just about anger, but carried reflection. A voice that asked, what if chaos isn't the end, but the beginning of something greater? The decision came like thunder on a quiet night. Alex knew he was about to walk a path of no return. He would rewrite the essence of Kronos. What was once a prophet of chaos would now be forced to face the consequences of his actions, to seek meaning in the void he had created. And this wouldn't just be a narrative shift, it would be a profound transformation, almost a redemption. The risk was huge. Kronos had solidified as a symbol of rebellion for a generation, an idol many followed blindly, seduced by his raw anarchy. And now, Alex was about to throw it all into the abyss, betting that the story of an anti-hero searching for redemption would resonate more deeply with his audience, or maybe drive them away completely. Alex returned to the script with a fervor he hadn't felt in a long time. There was an urgency in his words, as if he were trying to save something precious from sinking. Page after page, Kronos ceased to be just a symbol of destruction and became someone who questions, who hesitates, who feels the pain of past choices. It was an evolution that reflected not only Alex's journey as a creator, but his own search for meaning amid the chaos of life. But he knew the storm was coming, and it came with the force he had feared. The reactions didn't take long. Even before the first issue of the new arc was released, rumors began spreading across social media. The internet, always hungry for controversy, turned Alex's decision into a battle between tradition and revolution. Fans who had idolized Kronos for years were in a frenzy, divided between curiosity about the new direction and betrayal at seeing their hero domesticated. Some saw the change as an act of courage, a leap of faith, but many others wanted Alex to pay the price for attempting to transform the symbol of rebellion. The messages started coming in, and they weren't words of support. "You've destroyed what Kronos stood for." One said, "Kronos doesn't seek redemption. He is chaos, and you've made him weak." Another, more threatening message read, "If you try to change Kronos, we'll make sure you regret it." Alex braced himself for the confrontation he knew was coming. The storm was brewing on the horizon, and he had no idea how to face it. But something inside him, something Jin had awakened, kept him steady. Because, just like Kronos, Alex was ready to face the consequences of his actions. After all, sometimes true change only happens when you're willing to face the storm and emerged transformed on the other side. When Alex stepped into the publisher's meeting room, he knew he was walking onto a battlefield. In his mind, he rehearsed the perfect words to convince the team that Kronos needed to evolve, that he couldn't remain just a machine of chaos. But the moment he began explaining the new direction of the story, the tense silence in the room weighed down like an anchor. The looks around the table were cold, calculating. Finally, someone broke the silence. "This isn't what our readers want," said one of the editors, his tone a mix of disappointment and skepticism. "You're betraying the essence of the character, Alex. Kronos has always been the symbol of rebellion that bows to no one. And if you change that, frankly, sales might plummet." Those words hit like a punch. But Alex couldn't back down. He tried to argue, talking about the need for evolution in the story, how a narrative stuck in the same place eventually loses relevance. "I need to explore a new depth in Kronos. He has to feel the consequences of the chaos he creates," Alex insisted, his voice filled with urgency, but the publisher remained unyielding. "If it ain't broke, don't fix it," another editor declared almost cruelly. "Kronos is successful because he doesn't care about consequences. That's what sells." For a moment, Alex hesitated. It was too risky, but the confidence he had built with Kronos' success gave him the strength to move forward. He looked the editors in the eye and with a steady voice announced, "I won't keep Kronos chained to chaos just because it sells. He needs to change. I need to change." Using all his influence, Alex insisted that the new arc be published, even as the publisher tried to minimize the impact of the change. But he knew the real judgment would come from the streets, from social media, from the fans who had turned Kronos into an icon. And he wasn't prepared for what happened next. When the new arc was released, the response was immediate and vicious. Social media exploded with criticism, demeaning memes, and a flood of hateful messages. The hashtag #KronosTraitor quickly went viral, with the most loyal fans accusing Alex of betraying the character, of turning him into a weakling who had lost his essence. Kronos doesn't question himself. Kronos doesn't repent. The internet was out for blood, for vengeance, as if Alex had committed an unforgivable sin. What had started as simple rejection became a cultural war. There were calls to boycott the comic, videos of fans burning old editions, and even physical threats against Alex. "You don't understand what Kronos means to us. Read one message. You're a traitor, and we're going to make you regret this." Alex's nights became filled with incessant notifications, hateful messages, cruel jokes about his work, and invites to online debates that felt more like ambushes. In a moment of desperation, he even received a message claiming fans were organizing to raid his studio and destroy the manuscripts for the new arc. Everything around him seemed to be crumbling, a storm he had summoned and now didn't know how to calm. Doubt began to haunt him again, like a persistent shadow. He had tried to do the right thing, believing that art had the power to inspire change, to be more than just an explosion of meaningless anarchy. But now, with the overwhelming resistance from the fans and the rejection, even from those who should have been his allies, Alex started to wonder, did I make a mistake? Should this change never have happened? But somewhere inside, Jin's voice still echoed. True transformation will always meet resistance, Alex. And it's that resistance that forges change. And that voice was the only thing stopping Alex from abandoning everything. The storm raged around him, and he knew there was still a long journey ahead before he could see the calm. The criticism became sharp blades, each cutting deeper than the last. Every hateful message was a fresh stab at Alex's confidence, and doubt took root like a silent disease. His conviction, once solid as stone, now swayed like a fragile branch in the storm. The thought that he had made an irreparable mistake gnawed at his mind, day after day, night after night. And one slow, terrifying question began to form. What if giving up was the best solution? In the middle of the night, lying in the darkness of his apartment, Alex found himself gripped by an overwhelming urge to disappear, to drop everything, to let Kronos return to the chaos he himself had created and escape far from the pressure, the threats, the crushing weight of having betrayed his own fans. And for a moment, giving up seemed like a real option, maybe even the only one. When the shadows seemed ready to swallow him whole, that Alex made an unexpected decision. He took all the old editions of Kronos, a single candle, and retreated to the isolated cabin he used as a refuge, a place where the world felt less real. where he could hide even from himself. The darkness of the place matched perfectly with the darkness that filled his soul. With the candle lit, he sat on the cold wooden floor, surrounded by years of his own work. And there, under the flickering light of the flame, Alex flipped through every page of Cronos' comics, every dialogue he had ever written. He saw the character's journey, but also his own, the transformation of a rebel without a cause into an icon of unchecked destruction. But for the first time, Alex realized something that had escaped him before. Cronos wasn't just a work of fiction. He was an extension of the creator himself, a living, breathing creature, a reflection of all the failures, fears, and confusions that Alex had been trying to bury. And in that solitary silence, Alex heard another voice echo in his mind. It wasn't a message of hate. It wasn't criticism. It was Jin's calm and serene voice. He remembered a conversation they had on a cold morning when the monk had said, "True change will always meet resistance. It's like the rock resisting the water. It's the persistence of the river that creates the curves that shapes the mountains. And sometimes we need to be like the river, insistent, persistent." The words pierced through Alex's despair like a spark, igniting something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. He understood then that change always came at a cost. And that cost was resistance, was pain. But it was that pain that forged the strength needed to persist. Cronos wasn't just a story. It was Alex's journey, the search for meaning amidst the chaos. And to back down now would not only be abandoning his work, but betraying himself. The candle's light flickered, casting dancing shadows around the cabin, as if Cronos himself were there, watching. And Alex, staring into that invisible presence, made a silent promise he wouldn't let fear crush him. His commitment was to something greater than himself, greater than the fans' anger. It was to the truth he was searching for, whatever the truth might be. It was time to face the storm. And this time, he wouldn't run away. The tension was palpable when Alex arrived at the comic convention. Ever since he had accepted the invitation, after weeks of his agent's persistence, he knew this would be his trial by fire. It was the opportunity to speak directly to the fans, but it would also be the moment when he would face, in person, the anger of many who felt betrayed. But it was real, and he was standing alone in the eye of the storm. Alex began talking about Cronos' evolution, about how the story needed to reflect something more than just chaos for chaos's sake. But his words seemed to evaporate into the air, swallowed by the growing discomfort in the crowd, until like an inevitable explosion, everything collapsed. A group of radical fans stormed the stage, wearing Cronos masks. Their screams drowned out Alex's voice, and the security, unprepared for the intensity of the protest, struggled to control the chaos. "You killed Cronos," someone shouted. "Traitor," yelled another, as chants filled the hall. A sign was torn apart, aggressive voices filled the space, and the chaos that once belonged only in the comics was now taking shape right before Alex's eyes. "Be like Cronos. Destroy what destroys you," someone in the crowd yelled. And for a moment, Alex felt everything was about to spiral out of control. He saw violence about to erupt, maybe even worse than he had imagined. Fear was a tangible presence, like a cold hand squeezing his heart. But then, in the eye of the hurricane, something unexpected happened. Alex grabbed the microphone, and with a firmness he didn't even know he possessed, he raised his voice above the clamor. "Silence," he shouted, and his voice sliced through the chaos like lightning. For a moment, the world stopped. It was as if time had slowed, as if every person there was waiting to see what he would say next. Taking a deep breath, Alex let the mask fall, not Cronos' mask, but his own. He spoke not as an author trying to convince a crowd, but as a man trying to understand himself. "I know many of you are furious," he began, his voice carrying the vulnerability of someone who had been silently waging war for weeks. "I know you think I betrayed what Cronos represents. And maybe you're right. Maybe I didn't understand Cronos as much as I thought I did. Because the truth is, Cronos was a part of me that I didn't understand." Alex's words were raw, sincere, and the crowd, though still resistant, began to listen. He spoke about his own doubts, about the anger he had poured into the pages of the comics, about how he had gotten lost in his own creation. But now I see that every hero, every anti-hero has to face their choices. They have to grow. They have to change. Kronos was never a final destination. He was a journey, and I hope that you too can face your choices, just like he's facing his. The hall was silent. The Kronos mask stared back at Alex as if waiting for something, but the intensity of the confrontation gave way to a thick silence filled with unspoken emotions. Alex, in that moment, realized that his journey as a creator was intertwining with the journey of his readers, that he wasn't just rewriting Kronos, but rewriting himself, confronting his own shadows, making room for something new to be born. And then, in that crowded hall, in the eye of a seemingly endless storm, Alex had his epiphany. Kronos' narrative was a mirror, and every mirror reflects something different for each person who looks into it. He couldn't control how each person would see his story, but he could have the courage to tell his truth. And that truth was more powerful than any chaos. And as he finished speaking, Alex did something that surprised even himself. He smiled, because, for the first time, he wasn't running from the storm. He was dancing with it. The new Kronos arc moved forward, navigating through the turbulent sea of criticism and controversy. The voices of resistance, though still present, began to give way to a new kind of attention. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, readers started to notice something different, a depth that hadn't existed before. Kronos, who had always been a symbol of nihilism and uncontrolled chaos, was now struggling to understand the consequences of his choices, searching for a purpose beyond destruction. The anti-hero was changing, and with him, the perception of those who followed him. Alex's words, written with a newfound fervor, began to touch something deeper in his readers. Those who had initially rejected the change began to realize they weren't just witnessing the evolution of a character. They were experiencing a journey of self-awareness and transformation. Kronos, just like Alex, was questioning himself, confronting his own shadows, and seeking a redemption that wasn't simple, but real. And with each new edition, a new layer was revealed, both of the character and of the author himself. Alex's friendship with Jin became a pillar for him. Their meetings were no longer just about seeking advice. They were honest exchanges, open dialogues about the nature of art, purpose, and responsibility. Jin, always with his serene calmness, reminded Alex that the impact of a story could never be fully controlled, but that he had the power to direct those waves, to guide them towards deeper reflection and personal growth. And Alex accepted this challenge, embracing the creative responsibility that once seemed so distant. The publisher, initially resistant, couldn't ignore the positive impact of Kronos' transformation. Sales, which had initially plummeted, began to stabilize, and a new type of reader emerged. People who had once distanced themselves from the cynical and violent tone now found something they could hold onto. The new direction of the story sparked discussions, online debates, and even reading groups that analyzed the deeper layers of Kronos and his symbolism. The character, who had once been only chaos, was now becoming a representation of a quest and rebirth. And Alex, in the face of this new phase, reinvented himself as an author. He embraced the complexity of creation, realizing that the ink spilled on a page is not just sweat and effort, it's the essence of who he is, the relentless search for meaning. And this search resonated both in Kronos and with his readers. For the first time, Alex saw his work as more than just entertainment. He saw it as a path to epiphanies, a journey that could illuminate not only his own heart, but also the hearts of those who allowed themselves to walk alongside his story. And so, Kronos' narrative continued, not as a final destination, but as an endless journey, full of twists, falls, and rises. A journey that, like Alex's life, sought a greater purpose, a deeper understanding, and the courage to face and embrace the storm. Time passed, and the storm that had surrounded Alex transformed into a constant wind, no longer destructive, but a reminder of his journey and the path that was still ahead. He became a more conscious writer, more attuned to the layers of his own existence. The decision to change Kronos had been, in essence, an act of bravery, but also a silent declaration that Alex was willing to strip away old certainties to grow, even if it meant getting lost before finding himself again. Kronos' journey became more than a comic book story. It became a living reflection of Alex's own process of self-discovery, acceptance, and transformation. The sarcasm and destruction that once dominated the pages dissolved into something more complex, more real, as if each new edition was a turned leaf in Alex's internal journey. Every dialogue, every dilemma the character faced, was an expression of a new layer of understanding about life, about chaos, and above all, about the balance that can emerge from it. With this newfound clarity, Alex presented himself to the world in a way he had never done before. He started appearing at events, talks, and conventions, but now without the mask of cynicism he once wore as a shield. He spoke openly about his journey, not just about the comic universe, but about the challenges of being a creator seeking deeper meaning in his art. He shared the truth about the moments he nearly gave up, the nights filled with doubt, and the responsibility he felt for every word he wrote. And in doing so, Alex began inspiring other artists not to be afraid of exploring the layers of their own creations, to allow themselves to grow along with their stories. Jin remained by his side, a constant, silent presence. But his role was never that of a distant master or a guru offering ready-made answers. Jin was a friend, a provocateur of thought, someone who walked alongside Alex in moments of reflection. They often met, sometimes just to share a cup of tea at the temple where Jin lived, other times for long walks through peaceful gardens, where the sound of falling leaves became the perfect backdrop for conversations about the nature of life, creation, and influence. These encounters taught Alex something he had never stopped to realize: the value of silence, of full presence. The writer learned to appreciate the beauty in small things, like the texture of a leaf, the aroma of freshly brewed tea, or the simple act of being present in a place without the pressure of always producing, always reacting. He understood that both life and art are in constant flux, like the water of a river, and that it was this fluidity, this ability to embrace what is new and unknown, that made the journey truly valuable. And so, Alex continued to write, but now with a deeper vision, more connected to the reality of impermanence and the potential for transformation that exists in every moment. He didn't know where this journey would lead, and perhaps he never would. But at the end of each day, he knew he was exactly where he needed to be in the midst of the process, in the midst of the search, and above all, in the midst of discovering himself. The new Chronos arc brought with it a depth that had once been just a distant shadow. No longer the tireless anti-hero seeking chaos, Chronos became a character in conflict not just with the world around him, but with himself. His internal struggles began to reflect themes of redemption, acceptance, and moral complexity, and every past choice he had made now seemed like a stone that needed to be turned, a part of himself that needed to be faced. Readers noticed the change immediately. The story, once marked by aggressive and explosive narrative, became more mature, more introspective. The symbolism, once etched into Chronos' skin like a cry of rebellion, became a window to philosophical and existential questions. If chaos destroys everything, what's left to build? The character asked. And on every page, Chronos seemed to struggle more with his own destructive instincts than with any external enemy. It was a journey that many didn't expect and that not everyone would accept. The symbolism, once etched into Chronos' skin like a cry of rebellion, became a window to philosophical and existential questions. If chaos destroys everything, what's left to build? The character asked. And on every page, Chronos seemed to struggle more with his own destructive instincts than with any external enemy. It was a journey that many didn't expect and that not everyone would accept. Gradually, a new base of followers arose, people who sought more than a symbol of purposeless rebellion, who longed for a character that reflected their own struggles for meaning, for redemption. These new readers saw in Chronos a mirror, a voice that echoed their internal dilemmas, their unresolved questions. And over time, this group grew, becoming more diverse and more engaged than ever. Online debates, once centered on action scenes or one-liners, now revolved around the deeper layers of the comics. What does it mean to be responsible for your actions? How does self-transformation happen? And to what extent does art influence how we see the world? The publisher, initially fearing that the change in tone would kill the series, began to see what was happening. They were not just witnessing the transformation of an entertainment story. They were seeing the birth of a work that provoked cultural and philosophical debates, that challenged its readers to look within themselves and question the very meaning of rebellion and purpose. Sales, which had initially plummeted, began to stabilize. More than that, they started attracting a new audience. People who had never been interested in Chronos' cynicism, but who now found a character willing to face his own shadows, Soon, Chronos Comics broke the barriers of pop culture events and entered academic circles, book clubs, and even support groups for young people dealing with their own struggles for identity and purpose. The character, once merely a personification of chaos, now became a reference for self-awareness and personal transformation. He inspired debates about the nature of responsibility, about the weight of our choices, and about the power of art to provoke real changes not just in society, but in the individual. And so, the new face of Chronos didn't just save the series, it reinvented it. And with it, Alex found a new reason to keep writing, knowing that with every line drawn and every word chosen, he wasn't just telling a story, but creating space for others to discover their own. The meetings between Alex and Jin continued, like the tide that ebbs and flows, but never fails to touch the shore. One of those calm afternoons, while the two friends sat by a lake at the monastery, the words that hung in the air were like gentle, yet deep waves. Jin, with his gaze lost in the reflection of the water, smiled before speaking. Every creation is a journey, Alex. Every story we tell, every character we create, is a piece of us trying to find itself. In the end, it's not about where the story ends, but what we learn in the process of writing it. Those words resonated like the sound of a distant bell, vibrating inside Alex, echoing all the transformations he had gone through. He smiled back at Jin, grateful for the friendship that had led him into the unknown, making him face both the chaos and the calm within himself. "Thank you, my friend," Alex said, his voice full of newfound lightness. Because now, he understood his personal journey, like Chronos, had been a journey to confront his own shadows, to challenge his convictions, and above all, to embrace the unknown with courage and compassion. Alex's journey had brought him to a greater understanding of what it meant to create. He was no longer just fueling rebellion and chaos. He was inspiring reflection, growth, and transformation. Every line written, every story arc, became a bridge between despair and hope, between the unknown and discovery. Chronos, who had once been a representation of nihilism and destruction, slowly transformed into something more, a symbol of hope. Not a naive hope, but a hope that was like a flame resisting the wind, a hope built from understanding one's own mistakes, contradictions, and choices. Chronos' story never ended with a simple resolution. Because Alex understood that the act of creating is an endless journey, where each new page is an opportunity to explore deeper layers, both of the character and of himself. And so, Alex continued to write, always in search of the next question to ask Chronos, always chasing the next dilemma that would force him to confront himself. In every word, there was sweat, there was ink, there was the weight of everything he had learned, and at the same time, the lightness of all that he still had to discover. And like Chronos, Alex too continued his journey. A journey between chaos and order, between doubt and certainty, between who he had been and who he was yet to become. It was a journey marked by epiphanies, by silences, and by the constant desire to turn the ink that spilled across the pages into something that could touch, in some way, the hearts of those who, like him, sought meaning in the midst of the disorder of existence. The story continued, not to reach an end, but to keep being lived, felt, and written both in the pages of the comics and in the days and nights of those who dared to seek their own truth. This is a story about the deep and delicate connection between the creator and their creation, a bond that is often as unbreakable as it is invisible. Alex's journey reveals how our stories are not only reflections of what we feel and think, but also mirrors that challenge and question our view of the world. By confronting Chronos' shadows, Alex not only faced the character he had created, but also the parts of himself he had tried to hide. The narrative explores the responsibility inherent in the act of creation and the influence that these creations can have in real life. Throughout his journey, Alex realized that art doesn't exist in a vacuum. It echoes, reverberates, and inspires transformations that can be both chaotic and illuminating. This saga, therefore, is a reminder that when we face our deepest dilemmas and challenge our most ingrained beliefs, we find not only a way to grow, but also a way to inspire those around us to do the same. In the end, the story of Alex and Chronos isn't just about redemption or change. It's about the courage to accept the complexity of the journey, the duality of chaos and order, and the beauty of turning sweat and ink into epiphanies that can illuminate ourselves and others with new perspectives. And so, the journey continues. If this story touched you, leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content like this, and don't forget to share it with friends who might identify with this journey. And tell me in the comments, what was the biggest epiphany this story awakened in you? Let's keep this conversation going together.